Welcome to the EXCELcast. I'm Melissa Coppola, and I'm a program assistant here at the EXCEL Lab at University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. Today I'm here with Maija Garcia. She is a director, choreographer, and educator based in Harlem, New York City. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a joy to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit more about a day in the life of Maija Garcia? You do a lot of different things, and I'd love to hear more about what your different projects and roles are day to day.
Sure. Every day is different. And that's really how I designed my life. I wanted, to basically be creative every day. And so I might wake up early to do an interview at EXCELcast, or I might actually have a luxurious morning, make my breakfast, usually do a smoothie with everything in it, veggies, fruits, and all kind of power foods so that I can, be ready for anything. I love my coffee ritual. I usually check my thousands of emails every day just to make sure that I'm following through on communication. Communication's a big part of what I do. I have relationships with students, with colleagues and collaborators, with producers, and I'm constantly sort of spinning multiple plates at one time, and so communication is the way that I keep everything in balance.
For sure. So as a director, what sorts of projects are you pursuing?
Well, right now I'm directing something here in Ann Arbor, which is super fun because I get to be in my hometown after 20 years. I am working with Fisher House, Michigan. The campaign with Fisher House, Michigan is to build the first Fisher House in Michigan, which is a guest house for the families of veterans. Oh, wonderful. So when veterans are being treated at the VA hospital, their families can stay in a Fisher House. So I'm working with Fisher House, Michigan to raise awareness about this campaign through a storytelling event. Oh, so I'm directing a production at Hill Auditorium on November 8th. Okay. And it's free to the public. And I'm working with veterans from World War II to Iraq and Afghanistan on their major storytelling features, but also with student veterans in collaboration with dancers here at the U of M.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And as an educator, it seems like you fulfill a couple of different roles as well.
As an educator, yeah, I've been teaching for 20-some years, and I started teaching dance at a studio here in Ann Arbor called Studio One. And then when I went out to New York City, I was training mostly, but when I moved to San Francisco to go to college, I was teaching all the way through school. And so it grew from teaching dance, which was mostly jazz and contemporary at that time. I did Latin jazz and creative movement, all sorts of iterations. But then I actually started shifting into teaching empowerment programs, leadership programs after school programs in San Francisco. So I started to find a way to integrate life skills and leadership skills, and that felt like a nice broadening of what I did as an educator.
That's very cool. So your teaching style and experience has really evolved a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean this is back in the day. Now I always integrate movement on an intrinsic level with breath and dropping into the body, just as a practice, as a theater practice. And I think it's a modality that you find across the board. With actors, with vocalists and musicians. How do we focus? We have to drop into our breath and find presence in the body, and we do that through either really simple meditation techniques or movement techniques. And I find it really effective to begin with breath and movement, no matter what we're doing. Yeah.
And how did you get started with educating?
As a practical way of making a living. I mean, first it began as a way to pay for my own training. I was teaching ballet to little kids, and that was subsidizing my training at Studio One. So that that was a nice give my mother some relief. And then I started teaching, really just to make a living through college. And then I continued because it was something that I really loved. You know,
Yeah.
I love the ceremony of class, and I love the environment of creating in a studio with other artists, and just finding our playtime. You know, it's
Yeah.
almost like it's a free place. It's a place of expansion and play, which I think is really important.
Absolutely. So your background and your education, your degree is in sustainable development. Is that right?
Yes. So
Wonderful.
I danced all through college, but I was dancing professionally. I was dancing with companies, Afro modern fusion companies in Oakland, California, and in the Bay Area. And I had the opportunity to dance professionally while I was in school. So it didn't make sense for me to study dance.
Yes.
I did take dance classes. There were some incredible teachers from the Dunham Technique at San Francisco State when I was there. But I wanted to take all the classes that interested me. And I was interested in ethnic studies. I was interested in environmental studies. I was interested in global peace studies. And I really, I took advantage of the opportunities that were available to me. And so I designed my own major in sustainable development, which was sort of suited in urban studies, but I wanted it to be focused on specifically around women in Latin America in relationship to water, natural resources, and how women usually have a very close relationship to their source of water, clean water, bringing water into the house if it's not coming through the tap. And I just wanted to study the ways in which we might innovate around the issues of water scarcity, and bringing clean water into the home through solar energy, through wind. I was really interested in how that might allow, especially young women around the world, to have access to education, so that they weren't carrying water from from afar. So I was very passionate about this idea, but then that inspired me to travel. And so the sustainable development piece is, I guess that comes from a place in my heart that's very idyllic and optimistic in terms of what kind of change might I affect in the world.
For sure.
But it took me around the world. I needed to see how other people were living, and so I put a backpack on and went traveling.
That's wonderful. And where did you go?
I started in La Ciudad de Mexico, in DF, which is the capital of Mexico, and I traveled all the way down the western coast into Oaxaca, and then I went up into Chiapas. And this was a time when the Zapatista movement was very strong. And so I was very interested in how social movements affected social change. And so I was studying the Zapatistas, and I was studying the ancient Mayan culture, and I visited all the pyramids. And then I went over to Guatemala and Belize, and then I jumped over to Cuba, where my father is from, and I met my family there, who I have since visited many times.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I just love that all of your different interests have really melded into this wonderful, diverse professional career. And I'm very interested in hearing about how you used the ideas of sustainability and creativity and fused them together in your project.
Me too. It's an ongoing conversation. So in 2006, I was now living in New York City. I moved a year after I graduated from school. I actually graduated from a place called California Institute of Integral Studies, which is a mouthful, CIIS, which is a East meets West kind of. They focus a lot on psychology, but they have majors like cosmology and consciousness and interesting things like that. And so I graduated from there, and I moved to New York City. I joined Bill T. Jones' Arnie Zane Dance Company almost right away, which was a stroke of fortune. And I I was teaching at Dance Space Center in New York City, and I started to get really passionate about music, and I was really interested in the music of Fela Kuti, who's an Afrobeat musician from Nigeria, and I started to get really into his music. His songs are all 20 to 30 minutes long, so you have to go in, right?
Yeah.
And I started to choreograph, and this is post 9/11, and the atmosphere in New York was heightened, you know, and I started to make work based on what was going on. There was something on the train. When you were on the train, you'd always hear, you know, they were urging us to be suspicious of each other.
Yes.
You'd always hear, I'm
If
trying
you
to
see
remember, if you see
something, say
something, say
something.
something, exactly. So I started, my first piece was called Suspects, and I made a piece about sort of the stereotyping of criminals. You know, what does a terrorist look like? Is it somebody with a hoodie and a backpack, or you know, and if so, that is going to criminalize a lot of the young people of color around New York City. So I started making work because I had something to say about what was happening, and that inspired me to sort of create a company of collaborators, and that's how I founded Organic Magnetics. And I just started making work, and I would make work on my off time from touring with Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane, and it was a great way to integrate what I was learning as a dancer in his company with what I felt was coming out of me as a choreographer and as a director. And so the sustainability piece was really about how we work. Are we taking care of ourselves, or are we just throwing ourselves into the mire and you know, doing it for the art and coming out broken? Yes. You know, so sustainability on a very human scale was the first and foremost. And then when we make work, are we conscious of the waste that we're producing? Are we conscious of these big set pieces that we build and then we don't have an end game for? Yeah. Are we conscious of when we're printing scripts, you know, that we're moving through all this paper? Is there a way to go digital? So just really basic mindfulness. I wanted to bring mindfulness to the realm of theater and dance because I saw a lot of wonderful things being created in New York City, but I also saw a lack of mindfulness around sustainability because I was bringing that consciousness into the work. So I wanted to build, you know, collaborations more than a company. I wanted to build collaborations that were based on a shared sense of responsibility.
It's an ongoing community. It's
exactly
wonderful. Yeah. So I was really curious as well to hear a little bit more about your signature storytelling style and what sorts of decisions influence what you do in your productions.
So in terms of storytelling, you know, in the dance world, and a lot of dancers, if you're watching, you probably experience feedback from audiences that that they don't understand what's going on. That is this interpretive dance? What am I supposed to be getting from this? And I think that's something, that's an opportunity. Yeah. For a conversation. How do we tell stories? Where do we tell stories? Where are we compelled to share with one another? You know, when we come to sit around a fire, you know, there's no television to distract us and to entertain us. We become the storytellers. Yeah. So I was, you know, I'm always curious, how do we create that in our process, so that our, you know, the idea of storytelling really is, in what I do, starts in the process. How do we get to know each other as collaborators? So that we can have a deeper experience when we then go and say something with our work. Yes. And actually infuse our own stories into the work so that we are invested. We're not just empty vessels performing choreography or text or music, that we actually feel that we are personally invested. So that's the first aspect, I think, of storytelling that I bring into the process, which is that we all have to circle up and get to know each other.
Got it.
And beyond that, in terms of storytelling in the work, the body is a universe, and it's full of stories. And so the capacity for storytelling within the body, if we can tap into sort of the constellations within, if there is meaning, if there is intention in the actor, in the dancer, it will be expressed. And we can teach our audiences to hear our stories in new ways, to hear a story in the music by closing their eyes, to see a story in the body by really following a dancer's focus, where you can almost feel the intention of the dancer, or in text, expressing something with such articulation and such vitality that the energy comes through. So really, I think making storytelling the central focus has allowed me to just, I would say, clarify what we're doing, no matter what project I'm working on. If it's a story about, working on a musical called Cuba Libre, we choreographed a scene that was about the black market and the way people trade and exchange things, and how the value of relationships is synthesized with the economy. And so we can do that in movement in a way that, if you just talked about it, would be didactic.
Yes.
And so I think as a director and as a choreographer, also as a director, I like the idea of or the practice of expanding my work to into collaborating with designers, into collaborating with projection artists and sound designers and lighting designers, because then the storytelling can take shape in myriad ways. It's sort of, the possibilities explode.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing part of your story with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching. You can find out more about organic magnetics on Maija's website. Thank you so much for watching.
Ciao.